It's officially Pinktober, a month dedicated to raising awareness about breast cancer and the vital importance of early detection. Renee Aziz is a two-time cancer survivor, a motivational speaker, and the Rimau Honorary Secretary. She just underwent brain surgery, this non-invasive brain surgery, and she is here with us to tell her story. Welcome everyone to the 10th episode of Life in the City podcast. I can't think of a better day to discuss this important topic. Farid.
Agree. Thank you, Aida, for the introduction, and thank you, Renee, for agreeing to join us today. The reason we are doing this topic today is because we think when it comes to cancer, there has been a lot of coverage about what cancer is, the kinds of treatments that the people have to go through, but we think there's not been much coverage when it comes to how they deal with the mental health aspect of it, and we are hoping that Renee can shed some light on this topic for us today.
Thanks, Farid. Renee, would you mind if I share some of your background story
Sure, go
on
ahead.
your cancer diagnosis? Well, in 2001, Renee, you were diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer after having just turned 40, right? And over the next 9 months, you underwent mastectomy followed by 8 cycles of chemotherapy.
Yes.
Instead of the usual 6, and 5 weeks of daily radiotherapy treatments.
Yes.
Now, in the years that immediately followed, Renee discovered what it means to live life to the fullest by taking on a challenge to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa.
Yes, I did.
Well done. You say that lightning doesn't strike twice, but unfortunately it did. In 2014, Renee was diagnosed with a second unrelated cancer in her right parotid gland. You endured 5 hours of surgery to remove the tumor.
Yes.
And 6 weeks of targeted radiotherapy, after which you continued to focus on your career as part of a senior management team at Plus, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Until 2016, you discovered that your breast cancer had spread to your lungs, and at this time you were living with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it drove you to resign from your position at the company, right?
Well, yeah, I did, because I had to take into account, what the work was also putting a certain amount of pressure on me. And I decided I didn't need the stress from all of that, because I had other things to deal with on a personal front. And I felt that my personal well-being was more important than a job. But it wasn't an easy thing to give up, especially the paycheck. But in the end, I think it was a good decision for me.
That's right. We've met before this episode recording, and you told me a lot about your emotional reactions to your initial diagnosis. Would you mind sharing with our listeners what you went through?
Well, it was a while ago. The initial diagnosis, stage 2 breast cancer, was in 2001. And yes, it was just after my 40th birthday, and it came out of the blue. It was not something that anyone expects. So when I found out that I actually had breast cancer, my initial reaction was really one of, I suppose, shock, surprise. Was I angry? I don't think so. Was I upset? Definitely. I remember running out of the doctor's office. Well, actually, I started out walking, and then when I got out into the corridor, I sort of ran straight to the ladies and had a good cry. And I guess that's really how I deal with a lot of the emotional stress. I have a good cry, because for me it helps me release a lot of tension and anxiety. It's how I manage a lot of things. And I always used to say, while I'm driving, when I stop at a traffic light and I'm listening to music on the radio or on my car stereo system, I have a little cry at the traffic lights. And then, the lights turn green again. So, okay, got to stop crying now and drive to the next bit. And then at the next traffic light, I might have another cry. So it's really about fitting things in, I suppose, as you go along.
It was like a cascade of emotions, wasn't it?
It was. And on top of that, I suppose there was my family as well. And I can't even begin to tell you what they must have been going through. And especially for my mum, one of the things that I think was the hardest was letting my mother know what was happening. But I did, and she was actually pretty calm about it. And I think she gave me that confidence to just, keep doing what I knew I had to do.
Renee, what prompted you to go get the medical checkup? To get the medical checkup, was there something that happened before that?
Yeah, were there signs?
Well, 2001, what happened was I had just come back from a scuba diving trip. And I took the day off because I had to return all my rented dive gear back to the shop somewhere in Bangsa. And I was going to have a shower. And I remember I had a mirror above my chest of drawers just in front of the bathroom door. And as I was going into the bathroom, I happened to see myself in the mirror. And I realized there was something strange about my left breast. It didn't look the same. Something was different. So on closer inspection, I realized that there was, the skin wasn't quite how it normally should be. So it prompted me to go in to see a doctor the next day. I went to the A&E department at a hospital very near my workplace and asked them to check it out. So they did, and they did a mammogram. And I think we did an ultrasound. And it showed that there was definitely something there, a lump. But that doesn't tell you whether it's a cancer or not. You need to do a biopsy for that. So that was on, I think it was a Monday. So on the Wednesday was the day that the breast specialist doctor would be in, running her clinic. So I saw her on Wednesday. And we did a biopsy lumpectomy on the Saturday. So that was a very quick little surgery to remove the lump and the surrounding tissue. And she was actually hoping that if she could get enough out, that would be it. I wouldn't need any more surgery. But when they did their tests and everything, they said that the margin wasn't clear, meaning there were cancer cells right up to the edge of the sample or the what they had taken out, which meant I had to go back in for a full mastectomy after that. So that's how it went.
Forgive me for being very, very curious, because I've never had an in-depth conversation with a cancer survivor before. You would be my first, the first person I've had this conversation with. So prior to that, did you experience any pain? Did you have any suspicions of what it could be, or were you completely caught off guard by that?
None whatsoever. So I was completely caught off guard. Like I said, it wasn't something I was expecting. It did put me into a bit of a state of shock. That first day at the hospital, where I had the first initial mammogram and all of this done, because it was close to my workplace, of course I called my friends at work, and they came and sat with me in the cafeteria, and, sat with me while I had a good cry again. And it marked the beginning of, I would say, a new phase of my life, completely new, because I think once you've been told you have cancer, everything changes. Your entire outlook changes. Your image of yourself changes. And at first it's just an image of yourself that changes, and eventually you change physically as well because of all the treatments that you have to go through. And that is something you have to deal with, because you will no longer look the same. You will not feel the same. But the good news is, it's all manageable, isn't it? Because it's really up to you. And I always used to say, you have a choice. You can say, well, okay, this is the end. You can find a little corner somewhere, go sit in it, and just wait for that end to come. Or you can say, hey, what the heck, I still have a life to live, and I'm just going to go out there and enjoy it as much as I can, because it really does drive home the realization that life is fleeting. It's
That's right.
temporary. There are no guarantees as to how long you will be here.
Yeah, nothing is permanent.
Nothing is permanent, so you might as well make the best of whatever you've got, and enjoy life as much as you can.
What were some of the activities that you had to forego? You must have had your favorite activities, and it must have been hard, because I remember you were telling me about how when the cancer affected your lungs, you couldn't go hiking, which was your favorite activity. Please share with us.
Well, I still did go hiking. In the beginning, during that first 9 months, of course, I couldn't do a lot of things. I didn't have the energy, and walking up a flight of stairs was difficult. I didn't go diving for the whole of the 9 months or so. I think it was about a year before my dive instructor said, hey, and he did this to help me get over everything that I had been through, so he invited me on a dive trip to Thailand, which I went for, and yeah, it marked the beginning of starting to do things again as well. And then, of course, the invitation to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. But the second round, that when it came back in my lungs in 2016, it made it difficult. Breathing is harder than it was previously, but I still went hiking, I still did things, I still climbed mountains. It's just that I knew that my chances of reaching the summit were not as good as before. But I made attempts on Mount Elbrus in Russia twice, once in 2017 and again in 2019.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And in 2019, I did much better than the first time. And Elbrus, if you know it at all, it's actually two peaks. You have the East Peak and the West Peak.
I did not know that.
Yeah, neither did I.
The bit in between, they call that the saddle. And that's at around 5,300 or so meters high. And I managed to get to the saddle. And I knew I wouldn't be able to do the summit because I wouldn't have been able to do it in time.
At this point, had the cancer already affected your lungs?
Yes.
I would imagine in that high altitude, how did you work up the courage to go through all of that?
I think the courage comes with doing things. As long as you're trying, you will learn to understand what your body can do, what it can't do. And it gives you the confidence to try a bit more. But I reached that saddle and I knew there was no way I was going to get to the summit in good time, because it was already past 10 a.m. And, I knew that I would need at least 2 hours just to get up, if indeed I could. And I'd had a lot of trouble breathing just to get to the saddle. So I decided, hey, this is my summit right here. And my guide said, yeah, I think it's time we go down now. And of course I couldn't disagree. He gave me a few minutes to have another little cry.
How cold was it?
How cold was it? Oh, I don't really remember, but it would have been... The sun was out. I don't think it was as cold as it can be in bad weather. But definitely, I don't know, somewhere maybe -5 or so.
You're a real warrior.
Renee, how about your families? Did they express any concern about you continuing to get involved with physical activities?
Yes, but I don't think they express it so much to me as they do to each other. I have 2 sisters. By 2016, my mother had passed away already. But my 2 sisters, I think they talk to each other a lot more than they do to me about their concerns.
You suspect they were talking about you?
Oh, yeah.
Behind you, okay.
Oh, yeah. I think it's probably true of a lot of people. You never want to talk to the person directly because You don't want them to be upset.
It's
don't
uncomfortable.
Want to be, yeah. It's a hard thing to talk about, especially with the patient or the survivor, as some people like to call us. It's easier to talk about it to each other, and at least my sisters have each other, so they are each other's support as well. And caregivers need to always remember this, that they are also affected by everything that's going on with the patient. So they need to remember to look after their own mental health and
That's right.
well-being and find support for themselves as well. Yeah.
Renee, if I could take our conversation sideways just momentarily.
Sure.
Prior to this recording, me and Aida, we had a brief conversation about should we call cancer survivor or cancer patients. We're trying to be politically correct, and we don't want to offend anybody. So as a person with cancer yourself, which do you have any preference for,
Not particularly, and I'm not super sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
So, if someone calls me a survivor, I'm like, yeah, I am. If someone wants to call me a patient, well, I am a patient. I'm still undergoing treatment. I see my oncologist every month, regular as clockwork. We've tried to make that, a little bit more, like maybe every 2 months, but so far it's still a monthly visit. In LinkedIn, I call myself Cancer Warrior.
That's right.
Because it seems a little bit more positive and a little bit more about, overcoming things, overcoming challenges. But it's really up to the individual. Some people really hate the term survivor.
Why is that?
I'm not sure. You'd have to ask them, really. For me, it doesn't matter. It's just words. Yeah? And I don't feel insulted by anything or put off by anything. And I understand people like you say, people sometimes they don't know. They don't know how to approach the subject with you. They don't know how to talk to you about it. So I guess that's why I talk about it. Yeah, to make everybody feel a little bit more comfortable as well. And to share my experience, because I know there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions and they don't know how to ask.
When you told us about the times where you cried a lot, what were some of the other thoughts that came in your head while going through your different results, your different diagnosis, from the initial breast cancer diagnosis to the to how it spread, and how it spread again to stage 4? What were your battles at that time in terms of your mental health?
I guess, well, anxiety is probably top of the list. You're anxious. You're anxious about how it's progressing. You're anxious about, how long you can survive this. You are anxious about paying the bills. It's not a cheap exercise. Treatments can be very, very expensive. And, yeah. Then there is the fear. And, I tell myself that I've come to terms with the fact that this could be how my life ends. It could be the cancer that will finally do me in. But then again, it could be something else completely different. I could have an accident, a tree could fall on me. I mean, yeah. There's so many ways, 50 ways to kill your lover. Well, there's so many ways that life can be taken away from you. Cancer is only one of them. And that's the thing, I suppose, the main thing that we all have to deal with, not just cancer patients, but anyone. Whether you have cancer or not, is uncertainty. Life is full of uncertainty.
That's right.
So I suppose you turn to things like faith. And for a lot of people, religion gives them faith. For others, it's less religion and more about community. It's, again, up to the individual. I'm not a particularly religious person. I do believe there is a God, and I do sometimes pray to him. I'm not sure exactly what I'm praying for. I know it can't be for everlasting life, because that's not what it's all about. We aren't supposed to be here permanently. It is temporary. It's about living your best life for as long as you can. And that means having quality of life. It's no point being hooked up to a machine and being kept alive. So I hope that's how my life will go, that I will be able to stay active for as long as possible. And then hopefully when the end does come, it will be quick. But we can't guarantee any of that for ourselves. We really have no control over it. And so we have to accept whatever comes our way. And I guess that's another word, acceptance. You can't really heal. You can't deal with your situation if you don't accept it for what it is. I had to accept that I was now a breast cancer patient, and that didn't end with treatments. It was going to be with me for life. Once I accepted that, then I could deal with it. And dealing with it means understanding that life will always have its ups and downs.
Yep.
Treatments will always have their ups and downs. Since it metastasized to my lungs, I've had, I don't know, about 5 or 6 different kinds of medications that I've gone through. They are what we call targeted hormone therapies. And each one has lasted a few months to a year and a bit. And then it's not really able to fight the cancer anymore. So I move on to another one. The good news is that today, the advancements in treatments are quite fast. So when one thing doesn't work anymore, you have other options that you can look at. Of course, 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't so prolific,
yeah.
I think, the advancements. So people had fewer choices. So I think my generation and the generations that come after, we are lucky in that sense. We have many more options. Yeah.
Renee, you mentioned treatments being expensive. How do you deal with that? And how expensive are these treatments exactly?
Well, my advice to everyone is don't delay. Get your insurance in place. I was an insurance, we called ourselves life planner for a while. I've given that up now because it just introduced new stress into my life, which I don't want to deal with. But your insurance agents, your life planners are very, very important people. You need to find a good one, and you need to get your insurance in place. And there's 2 things you can do. A medical card is a must, and then critical illness. Yeah, I had a medical card, but at that time, the medical cards were quite limited. You didn't have things like no lifetime limit, no annual limit. So my medical card carries a lifetime limit of, I think, 300,000 ringgit and an annual limit of 100,000 ringgit. And I bought a rider which I attached to that for outpatient treatment for serious diseases like cancer. But it was limited. I think I had about 60 or 70,000 ringgit on that rider. And I exhausted that rider when I did the treatment for the parotid gland.
Tell us about how it affected your parotid gland and what is it exactly?
It was a lump that was in the parotid gland, which is the gland that produces saliva. And I had no idea. It's just that I was washing my face and I realized that when I touched this part underneath my jaw here, there was a strange tingly sensation. So I was due to see my breast surgeon anyway for a follow-up. So I asked her about it and we decided to do a biopsy, a needle biopsy. And that showed that actually this was a cancer, but it's not a cancer that responds to chemotherapy, so there was no chemo involved. In a way, thank goodness. I only had to do radiotherapy. They checked, the scar runs all the way down my neck because they checked all the lymph nodes here to see if there was any further spread. There was none. Again, I was quite lucky that I caught it early enough. And so that's where it ended. It just stopped. I didn't need to do any further treatment. And it's been fine ever since. We don't expect it to pop up again or progress in any way.
That's good to know.
Yes. It hasn't really affected me, except if you really look closely, it affects my hairdresser, because if you look really closely, one ear now is a little bit higher than the other. And I had a hairdresser who was trying to figure out why he couldn't get my sides the same. It's because my ears are not the same. So
subtle. What?
That's
Real,
it.
but really subtle. Can't even see it.
And again, imperfection. I think I wrote about it once for a LinkedIn
That's
post.
right. Yeah, I think I saw that.
You learn to accept imperfection, because really life is all about imperfection. Nothing can be 100% perfect. Even when you think it is,
It's not.
it isn't.
Renee, we learned that you recently had a what's called PET scan
Yeah.
sometime in May to check the progression of your cancer. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened then?
Well, actually, the PET scan in May, followed by the MRI, it was an annual scan, and that is what picked up the lesion in the brain.
Okay.
So really, it's a check, because a PET scan is probably the most detailed scan you can do, and I do it. If I don't need to do it more often, it'll be an annual scan.
Once a year
Once
scan.
a year,
Okay.
or thereabouts. And because it picked up the lesion, that's why we did the MRI to confirm. And the MRI then is actually more detailed about that specific location. So, it allowed us, me and my medical team, my oncologist, it allowed us to see that there was something going on, that the cancer has progressed, and so we could do something about it. So, everyone is like, going for tests and going for scans. It's very scary, because you don't know what it will find. But again, it's better to find it as early as possible, isn't it?
That's right.
Because then you can do something about it.
What's a lesion, Renee?
It's a term, I guess, and like everything else, we're not doctors. On our side of the fence, we're trying to understand all this terminology as well. So I think a lesion is just something that is an abnormality, a growth of some kind. You can have a lesion in the brain, you can have lesions elsewhere. It's a general term that means there's something going on there. Something has started to grow. It could be it could turn out to be more like a cyst. It could turn out to be more like something else. It could also end up becoming a cancerous tumor. Now, a lot of things, you can never confirm cancer without a biopsy. But you have a history of cancer. Your cancer has already metastasized to your lungs. So the likelihood is this is the breast cancer that has now metastasized to the brain. Yeah. Not everything is biopsyable. You can't always get a sample to biopsy. I have something behind the media, behind my sternum, yeah, close to my heart. We assume that to also be part of my cancer, what has spread. But it's not something you can biopsy, because you can't get a needle in there to take a sample out. I have had nodules around my lungs, and I was thinking about getting onto one of those trials where they
Clinical
try
trials.
out a clinical trial. But in order to do that, they have to biopsy things. They have to have results to show whether the treatments, what is it doing? Is it working? Is it making anything better? But these nodules, you can't biopsy them because they're too small and they're too close to the lung. So that trying to get a sample might actually damage the lung itself. So you can't always get a sample that you can biopsy in a lab and confirm this is cancer. But you know the history, you know other things. So it's really like a CSI thing, you're putting information together and coming up with your best answers as to what this could possibly be. And in my case, again, if you're going to make a mistake, you might as well err on the on the side, which means you do more rather than less. So for me, I take it as it comes. If that's what it is, or if that's what we think it is, let's deal with it. If we make a mistake, actually it's not, but we've kind of over dealt with things, it's okay, because let's over deal with things rather than under deal. Catch as much as we can. Yeah.
Would you say over dealing with things is the best way to go for people who suspect that any abnormalities they find on their body could be cancer? Because there are people who put it away and use excuses like, I have too much work to do, we don't have enough stuff at the office, I need to go to work, this could be nothing, and they put it off and put it off until that day comes when they get a checkup and realize, oh no, it is actually cancer stage
Whatever.
2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, they've waited a bit too long. To me, that's not about over dealing or under dealing. Yeah, if you notice something, you need to get it checked out straight away. Don't wait. The office, guess what? They will survive without you.
That's
They
right.
survived without me for 5 months. I've found that I had something different about my breast. On the Monday morning, I went straight to see the A&E at the hospital. Within 2 days, I'd seen the specialist. Within a week, I'd had the lumpectomy. Everything moved quite fast, but that's how it needs to be. Yeah. The longer you wait, the more likely it is that the cancer will start to spread, and you will lose years of your life if you do that. And the last thing you want is to go so late that it's already spread so far that you suddenly find you have 2-3 months left. Now, breast cancer, it's not so difficult to pick it up. There are other cancers, like internal ones, cancer of the stomach or the spleen or something that's internal, where it's a lot harder to detect early.
That's right. For example, pancreatic cancer.
Yes.
It's the most difficult to detect until it's advanced
Yes.
dangerously.
Yes. So with a cancer like that, a lot of the time, by the time it's diagnosed, it's already a late stage. But with breast cancer, that doesn't have to be. So for young women, you are advised, know your body. Understand your breasts. Know what changes take place as your, they call it menses, periods, your cycle. Know how your breasts change before your period, during, and after. Do your self-checks every month. And if something feels different, don't be shy about it. Go see your doctor. It might be nothing. Most of the time, it is nothing. Don't allow fear to stop you from finding out what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah?
And speaking about not letting fear overcome you, men get breast cancer too.
They do. It's not, it's quite rare, maybe 5% of all cases will be a man. And I actually have met a man who had breast cancer. And again, for men, it's even more difficult because it's supposed to be a woman's disease. How come I've got it? Is there something?
There's a stigma attached to it.
Yes, there's an additional stigma attached to it. Women have stigmas too, And there are people who will try and tell you that this is your fault. You must have done something really terrible in your youth, Okay. I'm like, okay. If that's how you want to believe things to be, fine. But that's not how I see things. I think cancer can strike anyone. It doesn't discriminate. It will strike people who are young, children, older people, male, female, any race, any religion. Doesn't matter if you pray 5 times a day or don't pray at all. If it's going to get you, it's going to get you. So to me, those things don't really come into the equation at all. Yeah.
Renee, how did you deal with the initial phase of anxiety? I'm asking this because when I was in school, in secondary school, I think I was in Form 5, I had chicken pox, and I began pulling out my textbooks. wanting to read as much as I
About
possibly
it.
could about it, and then I talked to my biology teacher. What's this about? And it was just a chicken pox. So I imagine in your scenario, it is for something much more serious than just chicken pox. How did you deal with the initial anxiety after your initial diagnosis?
It's interesting that you bring up this thing about, finding out stuff, learning about what's going on. And these days, of course, we have this magic tool called the internet.
That's right.
It's just that there is a lot of really good information out there, and there's also a lot of stuff you really shouldn't bother with because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So you need to be discerning in what you read. Don't just read everything and just take it all as God's word, And there are a lot of testimonials out there. Some of them are true stories of people just sharing their experience, what they've been through. And some of it is because they're trying to sell a product. And some of it is because someone is paying them. And not all of it is really a real, true testimonial. So again, the miracles that take place because, boil this leaf, make a soup, drink the water, and you'll be fine. I really wouldn't go with that. I would really prefer if people would seek out medical advice rather than all this kind of miracle cure, because most of the time it doesn't work. And a lot of people put a lot of faith in it. And then 3-4 years later, they're back at the doctors, but now the doctors are looking at it and going, I can't help you anymore. If you had followed my advice 3 years ago, this would be a totally different story, but there's not much I can do now.
That's scary to hear, but it's true, isn't it? Because I've read a lot about how a lot of cancer patients want to believe in alternative treatments, but they don't realize that you cannot mix these alternative treatments with Western medicine unless your doctor says
it's okay.
It's okay.
Yes.
It's very dangerous, right?
Well, I'll give you just a simple example because I haven't come up against that myself. But there are certain medications where you can't eat fruits like pomelos, grapefruits, because it's counteractive to the medication you're taking.
Yep.
It makes the medication ineffective. So you're told, okay, stay away from these particular types of fruits when you're on this medication. And that's just food. So imagine if you're taking other types of alternative treatments or herbs or things like this. So they always say alternative medicine, it does have its role to play. But if you are undergoing medical treatment, always check with your doctors. Is it okay for me to take this? Should I avoid this? And get their advice first. Yeah.
Speaking of food, what has been the shift in your diet ever since your diagnosis? Because food is very important for people who are going through cancer treatments, right?
Yes.
Would you mind telling us how you've handled it or are still handling it?
Again, everybody's different. Everybody has their own view of things. My view is simple, and I've always followed what my doctors have repeatedly said to me, which is eat well, eat healthy, don't overdo anything, and don't suddenly cut out an entire food group from your diet. Don't suddenly overnight become a vegetarian or something, because the likelihood is you will miss out important nutrients that you need. And I've heard about people who went on a diet of, I'll only eat broccoli and those vegetables that are antioxidants, and I won't have dinner with the family anymore because they want to eat their rice and curry and I can't eat that. And I can't eat sugar. And I can't eat this and I can't eat that. Well, the thing is, you need energy. You need nutrition. in order for your body to be strong enough to fight the cancer. And if you take everything away, even your healthy cells are going to suffer. And you won't be able to fight it. So I try and stick to, let's try and eat healthy as much as we can. Let's try and eat sensibly, and let's try and eat healthily. I don't always succeed, of course. I have my days.
Cheat days.
Oh, they're worse than cheat days. I do like my cake, and that was the other thing, that first diagnosis, a lot of people took me out for coffee and cake.
You just had the coffee?
No.
You still had the cake?
I had the cake because that was also, it helps you stay positive that life's not so bad. I'm on medical leave, but hey, I'm having coffee and cake at 10 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't do this if I was still at work. So enjoy the moments that you are given. Yeah. Of course, don't have cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But every once in a while, on a weekend, go out with your friends. And, if you don't want to have the whole piece of cake, you can always share it with your friends and have a bit at least. If it picks up your spirits, it's a good thing for you. Yeah? But always, in Islam, they always say everything in moderation.
Yeah.
I believe that. Everything in moderation.
Renee, you did mention at the start of this recording about how you have remained active, physically active, despite your diagnosis, and how you've continued to enjoy life. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about how have you rebounded emotionally from your diagnosis. I'm sure you said it yourself, you were emotionally devastated when you first found out, but now you seem to be managing it quite well. So how have you managed the emotional side of it? Like, how have you managed to remain positive?
I guess you have to remember that I've been at this now for like more than 20 years. So I guess, the whole thing about acceptance of my situation, the idea that it's not going to stay still. It is going to continually progress. And whatever I do, the treatments that I undergo, it's only about trying to keep that progress as slow as possible. I can't stop it. I can't get rid of it. I can only try and manage it. And so with that in mind, I guess writing about it, talking about it, it helps keep everything in perspective. If I go into my mind and I don't talk about it and I just think about it all in my head and I think about all the worst things that can possibly happen, I'm not going to be able to move forward. And that's not going to help me at all. And I think you need to look at the bigger picture and not focus entirely on yourself. You need to understand where you are in the world around you as well. And that helps a lot, put things in perspective. Don't focus too much on just yourself alone. Think about, why are you going through this? Is there something you can do that's positive to help other people? And one of those things is writing about it and talking about it, which I try and do as much as I can. And that's why I really appreciate opportunities like this. When you asked me to come on this podcast, I was like, oh, yes, I'd love to.
How about your support structure? I imagine you have friends or family members, or maybe other people who also have cancer. Can you tell us a bit more about the importance of having a support structure?
Support structures are very important because they help you stop always looking inward. Yeah. So family, of course. Mm-hmm. As I said, I have my sisters and my sister's children. They're all a big part of my personal support system. And then I have my friends, my close friends, my hiking buddies, my diving buddies, a lot of buddies, my friends on LinkedIn. There used to be just connections. Some of them are actually friends now, like Aida. And there's a wider circle beyond that. I think almost everybody I know understands my situation and that I'm going through something. They may not know the details, but that's fine. And all of these things put together, it keeps you, again, it helps you keep things in perspective again. There are a lot of support groups out there, and support groups are not for everyone. I enjoy being part of a support group up to a point, but I don't want it to become my entire life. Yeah, other women feel quite differently. They are part of the support group. They become part of the committee that manages it. It does take over a substantial part of their life, but for them it's a good thing, and they enjoy it, and it makes them feel connected to other women who are going through the same things. For me, it's like, yes, but not that much, up to a point. Mm-hmm. I've been part of a Dragon Boat team for the Breast Cancer Welfare Association, when we did our climbs for Concagua in 2007. That was under Pride Foundation. They've changed their name. Now they are the Breast Cancer Foundation, Malaysia. And these are all support groups. Pink Unity. I've done fashion shows, modeling clothing with some of these ladies since the first Pride Gala fashion show in 2005. And all these activities, yes, because it reminds you that you're not alone. There are so many women going through the same thing, and even a few guys, even a few men. So you realize that, okay, we can still thrive. We can still wear amazing, wonderful, beautiful clothes and feel good about ourselves. We don't have to feel, oh, life is over, or I'm ugly, or, these scars make me ugly. They don't. And for me, every scar is a reminder of what I've been through. So it reminds me how strong I can be when I put my mind to it. Yeah, and I think everybody has it in them, but it's a choice. And no one has the right to tell you how you should feel, how you should react. For some women, that's what they want to do. They want to go into that corner and just wait for the end to come. And you can try and persuade them to come out of that corner, but you can't do that if you're not invited in. Yeah, I have quite a strong belief that I'm always available to talk to someone. So, husbands sometimes, can you talk to my wife? Can you talk to my friend's wife? Only if she allows me in. I can't force myself on her. I can't force my opinions on her. And at the end of the day, she will have to make up her own mind about what she wants for herself. Yeah.
This emotional roller coaster that you have experienced and still experiencing, there will come a time when cancer patients will need to seek professional help to, again, talk about it, address their issues, right? And some may not want to write about it on social media or share, right? So would you say it's important to seek professional help when the time comes to iron out whatever it is that they're going through?
Again, I think it's a personal choice. Something happened to me once, many, many years ago. Nothing to do with cancer, nothing to do with health issues. But it disturbed me mentally. So I went to see, I think he was a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. And I had a session with him. And after that initial session, and I did it really because I thought perhaps I should, because I had gone through this rather traumatic incident, and I felt maybe I should talk to someone about it. And I talked to this gentleman, a professional, And after that, he asked me if I would like to continue seeing him. I said, you know what? No. I've had this talk with you. It's helped me put aside any worry that I might have had that I need help. I'm quite confident I can move on my own, and that was it. So I never went back. I never needed to. And until this day, I'm okay with what happened and how I dealt with it. And that one session was just to give me the comfort of knowing that I didn't actually need more. So it doesn't mean that everybody has to always go down the same path. You have to find your own path. What suits you, what works for you. And it's not the same for everybody. Yeah.
What is your final thoughts on Pinktober, early detection, and some encouragement and hope for people who are going through this similar journey or who have just been diagnosed with cancer?
Well, Pinktober, I think it's a great thing, because at least in the month of October every year we are reminded that we need to talk about these things, we need to create more awareness. And of course it's changing. With every year that goes by, the information is changing. Unfortunately, the statistic is not changing. I think it's still 1 in 19 women in Malaysia who will be affected by breast cancer in their lifetime. Yeah, which is not a great statistic, but it's better than some other countries still. Now, what do we need to do? We need to remind people that not all information is good information. Pick and choose. But it can be very helpful. In my case, when I was told what I would need to do, oh, you're going to have to do a mastectomy, and then you're going to have to do chemo, and then you're going to have to radiotherapy, and all this is being said to you and you're in a bit of a blur because it's so sudden. You haven't had time to really
Process.
understand, process all this. That's where the internet can help. But go to websites that are accredited, that
That's
are
right.
professional. Don't go to any just Tom, Dick, or Harry kind of website. In my case, someone gave me a book about breast cancer and its treatment and everything. And then I went on the internet and I checked out the Mayo Clinic, because they were at that time one of the leading clinics dealing with breast cancer in women. And then I realized everything that the doctors were telling me here was exactly what I was reading on that Mayo Clinic website. And that made me confident, like, okay, thank goodness they know what they're talking about. I don't have to worry that, I'm getting the wrong advice from the medical fraternity here in Malaysia. And we have really good doctors here.
Yeah, we do.
We do. Okay, make no mistake about it. Government hospitals, you may think, they have brilliant doctors. And then some of those doctors go out into private practice and they bring all that expertise with them, all that experience with them into private practice. And they're brilliant doctors in private practice too. The only problem with our government hospitals is they cannot cope. Too many patients, right? Now, this is where insurance comes in again, because if you can afford a private hospital, you take some of the burden off the government hospitals and leave that for the people who really have no other recourse. Leave it for the B40 family where the mother is the breadwinner. She's the only one bringing home a salary every month from whatever business she's doing. And she needs treatment too. And she can't afford that insurance that you can. She doesn't have an employer who will put her through treatment like happened for me. So try your best to take some of the pressure off, because sometimes it takes 2-3 months just to get an appointment to see a specialist in a government hospital.
Yeah.
Renee, I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
We recently went through what I consider to be a precarious period I meant the COVID-19 pandemic, where we had to be in isolation, and there were concerns then about people with existing medical conditions like cancer, about would they be able to take the vaccine, or there were concerns about people being locked in their homes. For you personally, how did you as a cancer patient deal with all of that?
I guess, I haven't had COVID. All my friends have had COVID. Some have had it 2-3 times. I've never had COVID until now. Please keep it that way. It's still around, of course. It hasn't completely gone. But I have somehow managed to avoid it. And during that MCO period, when there were a lot of lockdowns and things, I think I made the most of it, because I stayed home, and at that time I was doing the insurance business, so it took a lot of pressure off having to meet clients face to face. You could do it all online in a Zoom meeting. They came up with online methods for insurance agents or life planners to do everything on an iPad. You didn't actually need to go out, and I found that quite nice, because you didn't have to worry about driving somewhere, finding parking, and getting into the meeting place before the client arrived. So it took a lot of stress away. So I think every situation presents you with some advantages, and when they do, take advantage of every single one you can. I was super careful. I did, we did the whole thing. You went and bought groceries, and you bring them home, you wash everything.
Yeah.
We did all of that.
Those days.
Spraying everything with stuff.
Disinfecting everything.
Yeah. And I guess it worked. I did have the vaccinations. I got the AstraZeneca. So I did the 2, and then I did the boosters. But the last booster, the 3rd booster, was it? I didn't do. And that was after discussing it with my oncologist. We decided, you know what, let's just not do any more of these. Yeah, because by that time I was stage 4 already for some time, and then the medications were, they kept changing because they would only work for a certain amount of time. So the disease was able to progress as well. So we thought, okay, maybe we won't do any more vaccinations.
Any final thoughts on this topic, Farid?
I think you've given us plenty to think about and to reflect about today.
Yeah.
It's been a very eye-opening conversation for me. This is my first conversation with actual in-depth conversation with a cancer patient. Really appreciate your thoughts on this.
You're most welcome. I'm really happy to be here. I'm so glad you invited me to come for this. A lot of people, as you say, they want to ignore it. They want to pretend that, no, I didn't find anything. But as long as other people are talking about it and writing about it, at least they might read something.
Yeah.
And it might prompt them to say, maybe I should look at it. After all, look at that lady. It turned out to be nothing. And look at that lady. She's still around after 24 years. Or, hey, look at that man. He got it. He's a man. It must be so much more difficult for him. And he's brave enough to go out and do what he has to do. Maybe I can too. Right?
Inspiring parting thoughts, Renee, and we really admire your positivity and strength. It is admirable. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Once again, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for listening, everyone. This is our final episode for this season. We will be back at a date not specified yet. But thank you for tuning in. Life in the City podcast can be viewed on our YouTube channel and www.thestar.com.my/metro and the Star Online.